6.3, keeping yourself warm. Dressing for the weather is super important. When we talk about dressing for cool weather, we typically talk about dressing in multiple layers. When we do this, we want to choose inner layers for their open weave and thickness. This helps to trap air in, acting as insulation. A windproof and waterproof outer layer helps to keep the warm air from escaping and, of course, water from coming in. So, in our jacket, we wear a sweater underneath. And this sweater has air pockets, of course. So if you're actually thinking like about a knitted sweater, you might think, well, that's not very insulating. But in fact, it is quite insulating because the fibers have spaces in between them. So they have little pockets of air that can be heated up by your body, and of course the air before you put on your jacket and go outside. And these little air pockets are insulating. Okay, so the thicker our layer and the more little air pockets there are to heat up, the better that is. Now, this is ineffective if we don't trap that air in. So that's where our outer layer of a windproof or waterproof layer is great, because it doesn't allow that heat out. It tries to trap it in. So it keeps these air pockets closest to us and allows it to keep us warm. So long underwear typically isn't very thick. So why is it insulating? Well, the weave of it allows for air to be trapped, like merino wool. And then again, a knitted sweater is actually a great insulator so long as you have a good outer layer. So what would make the most insulating inner layer and why? A t-shirt, a knitted wool sweater, and a leather jacket are our options. A t-shirt, if you actually look really closely at your t-shirt, it is actually knitted as well. It's just knitted with a really, really fine thread. So a t-shirt does have some air pockets. A knitted wool sweater, though, we can see those air pockets. They're quite a bit larger. Our knitted wool sweater is also thicker, so those air pockets are a little bit larger. So that might seem like a better option than the t-shirt. Double checking, though, a leather jacket does not have air pockets. Leather is not a great insulator. So I would say our knitted wool sweater, because it is thick and has an open weave, and that allows air pockets. So what about animals? They don't get to wear a wool sweater made by their grandma. A winter coat is a puffy layer of fur or feathers, depending on the animal, that help to add fluff to trap more air as insulation. So we can look here at the two types of feathers. A flight feather is probably what we think of most commonly, like let's think of a Canada goose or a duck or something. A flight feather is what we expect to see on the outside of the bird. However, they are not very insulating because they're tightly packed. Okay, those little feather fibers, I'm actually not sure what they would be called, are tightly packed, and these flight feathers nest together very closely. So there's very few air pockets. Enter the down feather. So down feathers are very loose, I guess, in comparison to what a feather would look like. And so these down feathers are closest to the bird's body, and the flight feathers grow over top. Now, the down feather has lots of air pockets to trap in warm air and keep our bird nice and warm. Of course, down is a great insulator, and oftentimes you can find down winter jackets or a duvet. So they are insulating because they are fluffy and allow lots of air pockets to warm up. Dogs have different types of fur as well. I have a border collie, so she has a fairly smooth coat normally. And then when it gets a little bit cooler, she gets this thick puffy coat underneath, and they're shorter furs that are much more fluffy, if you will. And because they are a little bit more fluffy, they allow for more air to be trapped. So if this was the regular fur, we don't see as much. However, when I add my winter coat in, they're quite a bit more fuzzy. And then we have our regular coat on top, and these allow more air to be trapped closer to their body and keep them warmer than not having those down or winter coat fluff. I thought that this was quite a hilarious picture of the husky and its winter coat next to one another. So, of course, people had to learn how to keep themselves warm as they lived or moved to colder climates. And they didn't have access, of course, to Canada Goose feathers and duvet covers. So they used what they had. So these are Caribou Inuit ladies, all dressed up in their warmest parkas. So Inuit winter clothing includes furs to stay warm. On cold days, they typically actually wear 2 sets of fur. One is worn directly next to the skin with the fur facing in. Caribou fur is a great insulator because it is dense and the hairs are hollow. This allows lots of air to be trapped in between and inside the hair for a better insulation value. So caribou fur is actually quite short, but because it is dense and the hairs are hollow, there's lots of air pockets to trap that warm air. The outer parka, of course, is worn with the fur on the outside. The hood traps air in front of the person's face, warming it before the air is actually breathed in. So having a little bit of fur around your face can help to warm air around you. And this protects their lungs because, of course, breathing cold air hurts. Additionally, water vapor from the breath can condense in regular materials and freeze on the face and the clothing. So the fur prevents this ice from sticking around their face where they are breathing. Additionally, a lot of animals have like a bit of a waterproofing on their coat because there's oils in their coat and their leathers. And so the furs actually help to repel water as well. For footwear, seal skin is waterproof and is typically worn over multiple layers of fur. So again, we're looking at that insulating layer, but then we also needed a waterproof because, of course, you're walking on snow. Waste is considered disrespectful in many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultures. Therefore, various animal skins and bones were used for other purposes. So they've repurposed the remainder of the animal after hunting for food, and they've used it for clothing, some of the beading and intricate embroidery on the outside, making tools, etc. So after it's used as a food source, they really tried to repurpose pretty much everything within that animal to be less wasteful to the earth. We've learned to dress for intense heat because we had to. Firefighters needed to be able to go into burning buildings, which are very warm, and to feel protected. So suits contain flame retardant chemicals where fabric will just char and it will not catch on fire. So it might look like a match head when they came out if they were touching the flame. However, they did not catch fire, and that would be great, obviously. So materials on the inside of a firefighter suit absorb body moisture and heat to help keep them cool. Body temperatures are closely monitored to detect heat stroke symptoms. So firefighters can actually get heat stroke any time of the year, whether they're fighting in warm conditions or cold conditions, because their suits are made to keep heat out, but that also means sometimes heat can be kept in. So they need to be monitored very closely. Fabrics are tested to determine their flame-resistant qualities and determine their safety and use for firefighters or other industries. So here we have the Burning Man, and they will kind of torch this like little mannequin wearing the clothing that they're trying to test, and they'll turn off the flames. Hopefully he's not burning, because again, we don't want them to catch fire. If anything, they can only char. So they'll turn off the flame source and take a look at the clothing and see how much it's charred, if it's still burning, and evaluate it for its flame resistant qualities. Many industries actually require people to wear flame resistant clothing, like trades. And so it's typically a different fiber, or has different chemicals added to the fibers, and can be more expensive. It will always have a label that reports that it is a fire resistant, to make sure that it's clear that you are or are not wearing the proper gear. Just like safety boots, like steel toe boots, have the green symbol to note that they are appropriate footwear. Dressing for diving. So another alternative, cool water. Water temperatures underwater can be very cold, even in hot climates. The deeper somebody dives, the cooler it is, because sunlight is not reaching to the bottom. Divers' suits are very tight to prevent cold water coming next to the skin. Okay, so we don't want any sort of conduction. Neoprene suits have nitrogen bubbles that are trapped in the fabric. The more bubbles there are, the warmer the suit, because the more air pockets there are. It's a little bit tricky to see here, but this is like a cross section of a neoprene wetsuit, and you can see the actual little bubbles here. The darker spaces are air pockets of nitrogen. Remember, we talked about in windows, argon was a better insulator than just air. So nitrogen provides better insulation than just air. This insulated suit helps to keep water out, because we don't want cold water next to the skin, and keeps warm air in. Divers wear a hood so that they don't lose heat out their heads, because, of course, that's where lots of heat loss can occur. So they cover up as much as possible. You can see that this diver is wearing gloves. They'll be wearing little booties to put into like their fins. His entire body is covered with the suit, and then he just has a mask and his breather that he would put on his face. So very little skin is exposed. Some practice questions in your science textbook here on page 125.